For over 20 years, he was America's trusted morning voice, interviewing presidents, celebrities, and delivering news to millions of households. Matt Lauer seemed untouchable at the top of his game, earning a reported $100 million fortune. But in November 2017, everything came crashing down in a single morning. His co-hosts had to announce his firing live on air, their voices breaking as they told viewers about inappropriate sexual behavior. What happened next? The once powerful TV host vanished from public life, lost friends, and according to insiders, now lives as a recluse who only wants to talk to people who take his side. But here's what really went down behind those cameras that nobody saw coming. Matt Lauer's ascension to becoming America's morning television king began in 1994 when he joined The Today Show as a regular contributor. Unlike other journalists grinding through celebrity interviews and news segments, Lauer possessed a natural charisma that made viewers feel connected to him every morning. By 1997, NBC recognized his potential and promoted him to co-host alongside Katie Couric. This marked the beginning of his dominance in morning television. Lauer became the face millions of Americans trusted to deliver their daily news, weather, and entertainment. His interview roster included everyone from presidents to pop stars, establishing his reputation as someone who could handle any story with professionalism and charm. The financial rewards followed his rising fame. His salary climbed from hundreds of thousands to millions, eventually reaching a reported $25 million annually. This placed him among the highest-paid television personalities in America, earning more than many Fortune 500 CEOs simply for hosting a morning show. Lauer accumulated luxury homes in the Hamptons, maintained an extravagant lifestyle, and enjoyed the kind of job security that seemed unshakable. However, beneath this polished public image, a darker pattern was emerging. While viewers witnessed the charming host who brightened their mornings, his colleagues experienced something entirely different. Workplace whispers began circulating about uncomfortable encounters, inappropriate comments, and behavior that crossed professional boundaries. During the early 2000s and 2010s, these conversations remained confined to hushed discussions in break rooms and private communications. Nobody felt prepared to challenge someone with Lauer's level of power and influence within the network. NBC was generating substantial revenue from their star performer. The Today Show consistently dominated morning television ratings, bringing in hundreds of millions in advertising revenue. When a personality generates such significant profits for a network, uncomfortable questions tend to be overlooked or minimized. Those uncomfortable questions were definitely beginning to surface around Lauer. Reports later suggested the network had knowledge of settlements and complaints years before his eventual termination. Yet, they maintained his position because he was simply too valuable to lose. This situation transcended one man's career. It represented an entire media empire built around his morning show persona. Advertisers valued his presence. Viewers trusted his delivery, and NBC stockholders remained satisfied with the profits he generated. But media empires constructed on unstable foundations inevitably collapse, and Lauer's was approaching a spectacular downfall. The question wasn't whether it would happen, but when. That moment arrived on a cold November morning in 2017 when a single complaint finally penetrated all the protection and power that had surrounded him for decades. NBC failed to recognize that the entertainment industry was undergoing a fundamental shift. The Me Too movement was gaining unprecedented momentum, and powerful men who considered themselves untouchable were discovering their protection had evaporated. Lauer was about to become the most prominent morning television casualty of this cultural transformation. But the manner of his fall shocked even industry insiders who thought they had witnessed everything. The warning signs had been visible for years, but they were hidden in plain sight during his most public moments. The disconnect between Matt Lauer's public persona and private behavior represented a masterclass in maintaining false appearances. The warning signs of his problematic conduct were actually visible during his televised interviews, but they were dismissed as awkward moments rather than red flags. The 2012 Anne Hathaway interview became particularly telling in retrospect. Instead of focusing on her film or career achievements, Lauer chose to address paparazzi photos that had violated her privacy. He framed the discussion around what he termed a wardrobe malfunction, treating an invasive violation of her privacy as entertainment news. Hathaway's response demonstrated remarkable poise as she pointed out that photographers shouldn't be taking such pictures and that society shouldn't commodify the sexuality of unwilling participants. Her articulate pushback highlighted the inappropriateness of Lauer's approach. Yet the incident revealed something troubling about his perspective on women's boundaries and privacy. His interview with Sandra Bullock displayed similarly problematic behavior. Lauer repeatedly referenced seeing her naked in a film, transforming what should have been a professional promotional interview into something resembling locker room commentary. He made jokes about her nude scenes becoming his screensaver and refused to move away from the topic despite her obvious discomfort. The ease with which he made such comments to high-profile celebrities suggested how he might behave with employees who had far less power to push back against his behavior. Behind the cameras, according to multiple sources, Lauer's conduct became increasingly problematic as his influence grew. The Today Show workplace reportedly operated under a culture where inappropriate comments and behavior were normalized and anyone who raised concerns faced marginalization or removal. Footage later surfaced of Lauer making inappropriate comments when he believed cameras weren't recording. In one instance, he asked a female staff member to maintain a bent-over position because he enjoyed the view. The power dynamic made these situations particularly troubling. As the show's star and effective boss, his comments created an environment where employees felt unable to object. Female employees described feeling uncomfortable around Lauer while simultaneously feeling powerless to address the situation. He represented the show's primary revenue generator, the personality bringing millions of dollars to NBC. Raising complaints about his behavior felt tantamount to career suicide, particularly when the network seemed more invested in protecting their profitable star than addressing workplace concerns. Sources described various incidents where Lauer made comments about female employees' appearances, posed inappropriate questions about their personal lives, and created situations that violated professional boundaries. The power imbalance made resistance nearly impossible. Challenging someone who could effectively terminate careers with a single phone call required extraordinary courage. And Curry's experience became emblematic of these workplace dynamics. As co-host, she should have been treated as an equal, but instead faced what she later characterized as professional torture during her final months. When female employees approached her seeking help regarding Lauer's behavior, she attempted to escalate their concerns to human resources. Rather than addressing the complaints, NBC terminated Curry while maintaining Lauer's position and $25 million salary. The network's response sent an unambiguous message to all employees: challenging their star performer was not tolerated. Lauer remained too important, too profitable, and too central to NBC's success to face consequences. This environment allowed his behavior to escalate without meaningful accountability. As everyone understood, the network would prioritize their revenue generator over employee welfare. Lauer allegedly developed a sense of entitlement where normal workplace rules didn't apply to him. When someone earns $25 million annually and receives treatment as irreplaceable, believing in one's immunity from consequences becomes dangerously easy. The tragic aspect of this situation involved how many careers and lives were affected while NBC maintained their protective stance. Female employees who deserved safe and supportive work environments instead had to navigate around someone whose behavior made their professional lives uncomfortable at best and traumatic at worst. However, power structures built on silencing victims have expiration dates, and Lauer's was rapidly approaching. Someone was finally prepared to break through the wall of protection surrounding him. The collapse began when one woman decided that silence was no longer an option. In late 2017, a comprehensive complaint reached NBC executives, and this time the allegations were too serious and detailed to handle through their previous methods of quiet settlements and media management. The incident that ultimately destroyed Lauer's career occurred during the 2014 Winter Olympics in Sochi, Russia. According to the complaint, Lauer encountered a female NBC employee at a hotel bar after she had consumed significant amounts of alcohol. What allegedly transpired next became the evidence that finally ended his decades-long career. The woman claimed that Lauer invited her to his hotel room where the encounter quickly became non-consensual. She alleged that despite her intoxicated state and inability to properly consent, Lauer engaged in sexual activity that she had not agreed to and had repeatedly declined. The detailed nature of these allegations made it impossible for NBC executives to dismiss or quietly resolve the complaint. Once this complaint surfaced, additional victims found the courage to come forward with their own experiences. A former Today Show producer alleged misconduct dating back to 2001. She claimed Lauer summoned her to his office under the pretense of discussing work, then locked the door and requested that she unbutton her shirt. According to her account, the encounter escalated to non-consensual sexual activity that left her so traumatized she lost consciousness and required medical attention from Lauer's assistant. The fact that his own assistant allegedly had to escort a woman for medical care following an encounter with Lauer in his office raised serious questions about what NBC knew and when they knew it. Yet, this incident apparently didn't trigger sufficient concern for the network to investigate or take action at the time. Additional women stepped forward with similar experiences. One alleged that Lauer exposed himself to her in his office, then later subjected her to professional retaliation when she refused to engage in sexual activity with him. Another described receiving an inappropriate gift, an adult toy accompanied by a note describing how he intended to use it with her. The pattern became undeniable, multiple women across multiple years, describing consistent behavior where Lauer used his position of authority to create situations where they felt compelled to comply with his advances, followed by professional consequences if they refused. These allegations gained additional weight due to suggestions of institutional knowledge within NBC. Sources indicated that the network had quietly resolved multiple complaints over several years using non-disclosure agreements to silence victims while allowing Lauer to continue his behavior. If accurate, this suggested NBC was essentially facilitating predatory conduct while profiting from his continued presence. When investigative journalist Ronan Farrow examined these claims, NBC issued a statement denying any secret settlements, characterizing the referenced agreements as routine departure arrangements unrelated to misconduct complaints. However, Farrow, who had been instrumental in exposing the Harvey Weinstein scandal, maintained that documentation and evidence supported the existence of such settlements. The Sochi incident became particularly damaging because it represented everything problematic about the situation. NBC's most trusted morning host, representing the network at one of the world's most prominent sporting events, allegedly used that position to prey on a vulnerable colleague. Beyond the human cost, the situation created devastating optics for the network. Lauer's history of problematic on-air behavior also gained new context during this period. His 2006 interview with Britney Spears became particularly scrutinized, where he focused extensively on questioning her fitness as a mother, referencing paparazzi photos and essentially driving her to tears on live television. Documentaries examining media treatment of Spears later cited this interview as an example of how media coverage contributed to her mental health struggles rather than providing support. The cultural timing couldn't have been worse for NBC. The Harvey Weinstein scandal had already demonstrated how entertainment industry leaders could use power to silence victims for decades. The Me Too movement was reaching peak momentum, and audiences were no longer willing to overlook misconduct by their favorite personalities. NBC faced an impossible situation. Continuing to protect their highest-paid star would result in massive public backlash and potential legal liability. The complaint was too detailed, the evidence too compelling, and the cultural moment too charged for them to employ their previous methods of crisis management. The network executives who had spent years protecting their $25 million investment suddenly realized that maintaining Lauer would cost far more than releasing him. But they also understood that terminating him would send shock waves throughout morning television and raise serious questions about their own complicity in enabling his behavior. What nobody anticipated was how quickly and completely everything would unravel once that first complaint broke through their protective barriers. November 29, 2017 marked the end of Matt Lauer's career and the beginning of his complete retreat from public life. NBC executives made the decision to terminate him so rapidly that Today Show employees learned about his firing mere hours before going live, forcing his co-hosts to deliver the shocking news to millions of viewers who had trusted him for decades. Savannah Guthrie and Hot Cop struggled to announce that their colleague had been terminated for inappropriate sexual behavior. The visible shock on their faces reflected the disbelief of viewers who had welcomed Lauer into their homes every morning for over 20 years. For many, it represented a fundamental betrayal of trust. The immediate consequences were devastating. Lauer transformed overnight from one of America's most recognizable media figures into a complete industry pariah. No network would consider hiring him. No production company would work with him. And no amount of money or connections could repair the damage to his reputation. The financial impact proved substantial. NBC immediately terminated his $25 million annual salary. And unlike some celebrity scandals involving golden parachutes or secret severance packages, Lauer received nothing beyond his previously earned compensation. The network made their complete dissociation from their former star unmistakably clear. The personal costs may have exceeded even the professional and financial losses. According to sources close to Lauer, the man who once commanded attention at every industry event and Hampton's social gathering found himself completely isolated. Former friends stopped calling, invitations disappeared, and the social circle that had once revolved around his celebrity status vanished almost immediately. Reports indicated that he had lost numerous friendships with people who initially maintained contact, eventually ceasing their outreach. Sources described him as increasingly selective about his interactions, preferring to associate only with individuals who would support his version of events rather than challenge him to confront reality. The isolation extended beyond social circles to geographic retreat. Lauer reportedly spent most of his time at his Hamptons estate. Removed from the New York City media environment where he had once reigned supreme. The personality who had thrived on public attention and constant interaction became reclusive, avoiding public appearances and maintaining complete distance from the spotlight. His marriage to Annette Rowe, which had apparently been troubled for years, finally concluded in divorce. Sources suggested that Rowe had known about Lauer's affairs and inappropriate behavior long before the public scandal emerged, but had remained in the marriage for their children's sake and to support his career. Reports indicated they had essentially been living separate lives even before the allegations became public. The divorce proceedings revealed the extent to which Lauer's behavior had impacted his family. When the allegations became public knowledge, whatever remained of their marital relationship finally collapsed for Rowe, who had endured years of private humiliation. The public exposure of her husband's behavior represented both vindication and additional trauma. Particularly revealing about Lauer's current mindset was his apparent refusal to accept full responsibility for his actions. Sources close to him reported that he felt unfairly treated and believed the punishment exceeded the alleged crimes. This attitude of victimization rather than accountability helped explain why his limited attempts at rehabilitation failed. In 2019, he attempted to re-enter public discourse by publishing an opinion piece defending himself against some allegations. The effort backfired spectacularly. Instead of demonstrating remorse or personal growth, the piece appeared tone-deaf and self-serving, reinforcing public perception that he still failed to understand the gravity of his actions. His romantic life saw some development when reports emerged of a relationship with marketing executive Shaman Abbas. However, even this new relationship highlighted his continued isolation from his previous existence. The couple's appearances at Hampton's events, where his ex-wife was also present, created uncomfortable situations that underscored how his past continued to follow him. While not financially devastating, his economic situation did change significantly. Though he reportedly retained substantial wealth from his years of high earnings, his luxurious lifestyle required adjustment. Real estate investments provided some financial cushioning, but gone were the days of unlimited spending and the privileges that accompanied television royalty status. Most striking about Lauer's post-scandal existence was his near-complete disappearance from public consciousness. In an era when disgraced celebrities often attempt comebacks through podcasts, social media, or alternative platforms, Lauer has remained almost entirely silent. No memoir, no redemption interviews, no gradual re-emergence into public life. This absence suggests either his recognition of how thoroughly damaged his reputation has become or his continued belief that he might eventually return to prominence. Either interpretation reveals someone fundamentally disconnected from the reality of his situation and the permanent nature of his fall from grace. Matt Lauer's downfall transcended individual misconduct to become a symbol of systemic problems within the entertainment industry's treatment of powerful men and their victims. His case exposed the toxic culture that allowed inappropriate behavior to flourish as long as it didn't threaten financial performance. The timing of his termination, occurring during the Me Too movement's peak momentum, transformed his scandal from another celebrity downfall into proof that no one remained untouchable, regardless of their financial value to employers or publicity. NBC's handling of the crisis became a template for corporate crisis management and responsibility. Their decision to terminate him immediately without attempting compromised solutions or waiting for legal proceedings signaled to other networks and employers that traditional methods of managing these situations, quiet settlements and willful ignorance, were no longer viable. The impact extended far beyond morning television. Networks across the industry began reviewing workplace policies, implementing stronger reporting mechanisms, and scrutinizing their own high-profile personalities who might be engaging in similar behavior. The entire entertainment industry was forced to confront the culture that had enabled these situations to persist for decades. For victims of workplace harassment and assault, Lauer's termination represented a crucial turning point. It demonstrated that speaking up could actually result in consequences for powerful perpetrators, something that had seemed impossible just years earlier. The woman whose complaint brought him down achieved what many others before her could not: genuine accountability. However, the case also highlighted the institutional failures that had allowed such behavior to continue for so long. If reports about previous settlements and ignored complaints were accurate, it meant NBC had prioritized profits over employee safety for years. The company faced serious questions about what they knew, when they knew it, and why they had failed to act sooner. The media landscape itself underwent changes as a result. Morning show dynamics shifted, with networks becoming more cautious about power imbalances and workplace relationships. The casual misogyny that had been normalized in many entertainment workplaces suddenly became unacceptable as companies recognized the financial and reputational risks of ignoring these issues. Lauer's case also served as a warning about the dangers of building brands around single personalities. NBC had invested so heavily in his image and success that they became vulnerable to exactly this type of scandal. When he fell, he took significant portions of their morning show credibility with him.